Hello, Waterloo Region. You're listening to Meet the Candidate on CKMS-FM 102.7 Radio Waterloo. My name is Bob Jonkman. In this episode, we meet Héline Chow, the NDP candidate for Waterloo. In Meet the Candidate, Radio Waterloo provides 25 minutes of free airtime to Waterloo Region candidates running in the 2025 federal election. This is not an interview, but 25 minutes of unstructured time. Candidates could tell you about their platform, the local Waterloo Region issues they'll be tackling, why they're running, or what they do outside of politics. Note that the views expressed are not necessarily those of the Radio Waterloo Board of Directors, volunteers, sponsors, or advertisers. Now let's meet the candidate, Héline Chow, who's accompanied by Grant Jensen.
Hi everyone, I guess we're on air, so I guess we'll get started then, Grant, if you want to start asking the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been going around, Héline, canvassing, also just social media, trying to ask around what everyone's biggest issues are and what your response to those are. So we've compiled a few of those questions here, but before we jump into that, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so I realize I'm relatively unknown in the region, but trying to get more out there, so I guess I'll start with the basics. I'm a 30-year-old woman. I'm the daughter of immigrants. My mom is French, my dad is Chinese. I wasn't born in Waterloo, but I moved here from Ottawa in 2019 to pursue my PhD in environmental engineering at the University of Waterloo. During my PhD, I tried to take a really active role in the community. I took leadership roles on for unionization efforts that were happening there for research and teaching assistants. I've also been active in other ways, including leading my department's graduate student association. I also started a Women in Engineering graduate committee, among lots of other things. If you talk to anyone from my PhD, you tell them, they'll tell you that, I was running around everywhere doing everything as I could. After graduating, I had already fallen in love with the city of Waterloo and decided to stay here and make it my home. And before jumping into the world of politics, I worked as an engineer at the federal government at Environment and Climate Change Canada to work on national level environmental policy. I guess I can mention too what I do in my spare time. I'm not just out here joining every club I can. I also like to watch, the latest movies and TV shows with my friends every day. What if I try to, anyways? I just finished Severance. I think that was an amazing show. Highly recommend. I also love to hike and to camp during the summer months and listening to good CBC podcasts. I'll shout out Front Burner and Uncover since I'm on the radio here. But yeah, that's me.
Great. And so what after all of that, why did you decide to run in this election?
Well, there's a short answer, and then there's a long answer. I'll start with the short one, which is I think we all recognize here that the world was getting a lot scarier, and I wanted to make sure that I stayed in the fight to make it better in the long run. The longer answer is that I've experienced a lot of the hardships. I've witnessed a lot of the hardships that people in this area are feeling. As a young professional, I experienced the increased pressures of the cost of living directly. I've had my rent go up year over year with no signs of slowing, and I was really starting to lose hope that I could ever own a home. And I know a lot of people in our age group are sort of feeling the same way as me. Everywhere I looked, I saw people working harder than ever, but feeling like they're falling further and further behind. My whole life, I've also been a passionate advocate for the environment. I think a lot of millennials will relate to this, but I think I first started, even thinking about politics because I watched An Inconvenient Truth back in 6th grade and said, what? We got to be doing something about this. This seems really bad. And I sort of took that concern and that passion with me throughout my whole life. I really see the inaction on climate change by this current government as a failing to protect the future for Canadians and everyone globally, and a real failure to capitalize on creating a green economy where Canadian workers can lead globally in this transition. I've also recently, unfortunately, witnessed the rise of attacks against people's fundamental rights and freedoms. Whether it's increasing access to abortion or protecting the rights of marginalized people, I felt the need to get involved to make sure that we keep moving forward and not back.
Mm. And so with all that said, what made you gravitate towards the New Democratic Party, or NDP?
Yeah, well, I think the NDP basically has the best plans and the best record on them when it comes to fighting for Canadians. Whether it's healthcare, worker rights, or even the environment, the NDP has sort of always led the charge when it comes to progressive values and policies. We can see it in all the policies I'm sure we're going to get to today with the rest of the questions. But when I talk about the NDP, when I see what the NDP does, I can see it really does prioritize people over profits. I was also locally inspired by Catherine Fife, who is our provincial NDP MP. I see the good work she does in this community and what she represents as the NDP, and thought, why not me then?
Of course. So, of course, public health care is something that a lot of Canadians are proud of, but I think we're witnessing year after year it deteriorate, and people are experiencing greater wait times in emergency rooms and for specialized medical testing. And there's also, of course, an extreme lack of access to family doctors. Well, while funding is largely governed by the provinces, it seems that these challenges are not at all unique to Ontario. So what do you think the federal government can do to step in and create some change in public health care?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone has sort of experienced some of the problems with the healthcare system that we're currently experiencing in Ontario, but also across Canada. I've personally experienced the issues with our healthcare system. I've been without a family doctor for 10 years. I only just got one last week, which I'm really happy about, but I know the situation isn't like that for everyone, right? At the provincial level, I will say that Doug Ford is pushing privatization of the healthcare system and also underpaying our healthcare professionals. Although healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction, there is a lot of things that the federal government can do and that the NDP can work to improve to make the healthcare system more robust across Canada. One of the main ways we can do that is using strengthening the Canadian Healthcare Act, or Canadian Health Act, sorry. And that will stop the expansion of for-profit healthcare across Canada. For-profit healthcare or privatization of certain services in healthcare has been lauded by the Conservatives at the federal level and sort of mentioned and maybe thought of a pathway to pursue by the Liberals. So the NDP wants to make sure that we stand there against that for the hard-earned win of public healthcare that we have in Canada. We'll also work with the provinces and territories to make sure we can recruit and retain more doctors and nurses to work across Canada and expand the pharmacare and dental care programs that we already won and secured from the last government. More specifically on pharmacare, I think a lot of people are frustrated. We have this public health care system, but we don't have access to the actual drugs that we get prescribed, right? I believe the most effective way of fixing this problem is really to build a universal pharmacare system because, one, it reduces the price because we're purchasing things in bulk, and then we can pass those savings on to Canadians, but also it ensures that we have secure access to these drugs. Right now we kind of rely on big pharmaceutical companies to provide those drugs, and we're kind of at the whims of the CEOs and the economy in that case. I have no doubt that the transition to a universal pharmacare system from the almost private coverage across the country will experience a few bumps along the way. But I always like to bring this up because I think it's important. Every other country except Canada with a universal healthcare system also includes coverage for prescription medication. That's places like the UK, France, New Zealand, Germany. If they can figure it out, why not us?
Mm-hmm. And so on a very similar note, a lot of people are facing troubles with affordability and poverty. And so what is your plan to deal with those kinds of problems for Canadians?
Yeah, so I'll start off with some really sobering statistics that I've seen specifically about the region of Waterloo. Recent counts have shown that the number of people experiencing homelessness in Waterloo Region have more than doubled to over 2,300 during the past 3 years. In 2024, the Food Bank of Waterloo Region also faced the highest demand for food assistance in their 40-year history, and roughly a third of those visits were from children. 1 in 8 households in our community needed food support from the 54 organizations in the Community Food Assistance Network. And to put that into perspective, last year it was just 1 in 10, 2 years ago it was 1 in 14, and 3 years ago it was in 1 in 20. To contrast with that, in 2023, the grocery store sector made a whopping $6 billion in profit. So clearly there's a disconnect here and something is quite wrong. And New Democrats are in it to make sure that the system works for working people, not those big corporations and billionaire CEOs. The way that we plan to lower your bills is that we used Walleye Power in the last government to help with lowering your monthly bills through a few different programs. I already mentioned the National Dental Care Program, which can save families up to $1,700, and we gave over 3.3 million people who didn't have access before a dentist. We also delivered on our National Pharmacare Program, which made birth control and diabetes medication free for everyone across Canada. And we delivered on a $500 Canada housing benefit that helped over 1.8 million people pay their rent and mortgage. That's all the things that we did, but we're not going to stop there. We're going to continue to fight to make your life more affordable. A few ways that we're going to do that is putting money back into people's pockets with a tax cut targeted at those who need it most rather than the wealthy few. We're also going to take the GST off of essential items, things like groceries, home heating, cell phone bills, strollers, diapers, things that people need to buy that they shouldn't be paying tax on. And putting a price cap on groceries that you need, but you don't have a situation where you have to pay double, triple the cost for essential items. And the last part, of course, is building homes that people can actually afford.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of houses, of course, that's an essential part of affordability for many people. So what's your plan to tackle not only the rising costs of rents, but also houses?
Yeah, so I can start again with a few stats for a specific region to sort of center the conversation on. So the average rent prices have almost doubled in Waterloo and have really not come down despite increased vacancies in the region. On the other side, house prices have also increased by 1.5 times since 2019, while inflation in that time has only gone up by about 1.2 times. There's obviously a disconnect here. People are paying more for less. So under our plan, federal housing funding will be tied to real protections for tenants. That includes a national rent control. I can say personally, I had to move from where I was living last year because the building was not rent controlled and I couldn't afford to keep staying there and having the rent go up. So a national rent control, I'm sure, will be a very welcome policy for a lot of Canadians across Ontario at the very least. We'll also put a ban on fixed-term leases, rent-evictions, and dem-evictions. I was recently at an Acorn rally against a rent-eviction here in Waterloo, and I think it's terrible that you're kicking out families that have sometimes lived in these buildings for upwards of 10 years with their families, and the landlord can just decide that they want to triple the rent and kick these people out, right? That's unacceptable. We're also going to put a ban on rent price fixing and landlord collusion. And we'll also recognize tenant unions like Acorn. We're also going to build homes that people can afford and announce a plan to help first-time homebuyers. We'll ban investment firms from buying up the already affordable properties that exist. And we'll use public land to build as many affordable housing as we can, and things that are tied to affordability, not just what market rates are. And we'll make sure that is not just luxury condos like we've seen a lot of developers do.
Mm-hmm. Similar note, but a little bit of a departure. So there's been a lot of, concern about how certain colleges are running diploma bills, and people are concerned about the amount of new international students in the region, particularly in Waterloo that has a few universities in town. What do you feel is the right approach to deal with this? What would the NDP do more broadly to change the immigration system?
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, I'll say that I've been talking to actually a lot of international students as I go door to door here in Waterloo, and I'll tell the radio what I told each one of them: the housing crisis is not your fault. We invited international students into this country, and now the other parties are trying to blame them for our own government's inaction on housing and affordability. I think that's completely unacceptable. I think the source of frustration from a lot of people starts with the lack of funding to our public institutions, which has really catalyzed this cash grab for many post-secondary institutions across Ontario. Bringing in international students and basically getting as much money from them to run the institution rather than, focusing on what they can do to actually improve the student experience. With proper funding, I do believe there would be less incentive for these bad actors to sort of do this sort of cash grab. I think universities also need to look a little bit inwards and see where they're actually spending their money and focus maybe less on bonuses and super high executive salaries and more on the student experience and the quality of education. More generally, you mentioned the immigration system as a whole. I think when people come to Canada, we must be in a position to ensure their success here. I think it's our responsibility to build the infrastructure required to support a growing community and economy. And I do believe that the existing government wanted to reap the benefits of an immigration system without actually investing in the well-being of those that are arriving. And really, we can see that now with the way they want to blame them on the problems that we're facing here. One of the other systems that I think is being totally abused right now is the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. The UN calls this a breeding ground for modern-day slavery, and if these people are needed to work in Canada, they should have access to a pathway to citizenship here in Canada. So the NDP will end Canada's reliance on temporary foreign workers and eliminate closed work permits. We will also prioritize immigration that has a direct path to permanent resident and citizenship if the person wants to stay here. The other things we'll do on immigration is fix the backlog to help reunite families. And we'll also fight to improve the foreign credential recognition program so it's easier for qualified immigrants to work in key areas, things like healthcare, engineering. We'll also implement a broad and inclusive regularization program that gives those without status a clear pathway to permanent residency. Canada is a nation of immigrants. I'm a child of immigrants, and our diversity really does make us who we are. When we welcome people to Waterloo, we just have to make sure we do it in a responsible manner to ensure everyone has the chance to thrive in Canada.
Perfect. So you've mentioned a few social programs so far, and of course, whenever that comes up, people are very concerned about how it's going to be paid for. Mm-hmm. So I guess broadly, do you believe taxes should be higher or lower? Should services be cut or kept? And how would you move money around in the budget to accommodate some of the programs you've discussed so far?
Yeah, so I believe that the wealthiest people in Canada are not paying the amount of taxes they should be paying into our system and should be paying more. Currently, many of the richest Canadians are actually, and highest grossing corporations, are hiding their money in offshore tax havens. And the NDP plan would close these loopholes to use the increased revenue from that to build more infrastructure, strengthen our healthcare system, and otherwise lower costs for everyday Canadians. However, the NDP also recognizes that we're in tough economic uncertain times and that people need to be taken care of and given a break. So we also plan to cut taxes by raising the basic personal amount to $19,500, and this would save people making under $177,000 about $500, so basically most Canadians. We also plan to remove the GST from essentials like grocery store meals, diapers, strollers, monthly bills. This will help low-income earners particularly because everyone pays the same sales tax, so it's proportionally more significant for them than for wealthy Canadians. In short, the plan really is that wealthy Canadians should pay more. They're reaping the benefits of our system. They should pay into it, while working Canadians deserve more support during these times.
Mm. Given that said, where do you stand on childcare? What are you going to do to make more affordable childcare available and make it more available to more families? A lot of people are experiencing, being stuck on endless wait lists. And so what can be done about that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked to a lot of young families in the region who, struggled to find their childcare institution. Some people are putting themselves on lists before they even have their kids, right, and still not getting the service access in time. I think childcare is an essential part of addressing the affordability crisis here in Ontario. I grew up in Quebec, where we already had a childcare system that was accessible to everyone, and I've seen how that can benefit a society as a whole, especially women who are able to return to the workforce faster if they'd like to. I've heard the same concern from a lot of people around Waterloo. NDP will leverage their position in the previous government to help push forward the national childcare program that tries to establish $10 a day daycare across all of Canada. But a lot of work still needs to be done to ensure that there's equal access to this program across the country and certainly in Waterloo. And that's why the NDP will continue to work towards opening more of those $10 a day childcare spots and expand the program that we started, make sure that we enshrine it and it doesn't get cut by the other two parties.
Mm. You mentioned an early a memory for you and a source of inspiration was the environment and climate change. So in the federal government, what can be done about that, and what do you personally believe should be done?
I think the federal government has a huge role to play when it comes to tackling climate change and being, a leader on the global stage when it comes to moving into the green transition. I always thought it was really the wrong move to frame action on climate change against a good economy, saying, we have to focus on the economy, deal with the environmental issues later. I think creating that green economy for Canada is actually an incredible opportunity, especially considering now everything happening south of the border. We do need to diversify our economy in light of tariffs and whatever the guy down there is going to decide to do. The NDP's plan is to create hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs by investing in clean energy, energy-efficient, affordable homes, electric transit, and zero-emission vehicles. I think Waterloo in particular is uniquely positioned to benefit from these investments since We are a technology innovation hub with research facilities at the University of Waterloo for electric vehicle battery research, as well as the Waterloo Climate Institute. The NDP support for electric transit will also bolster the GRT's existing efforts to provide zero-emission transit via the ION light rail and electric bus program. We have a lot of great talent here in Waterloo studying at both of the universities and also the college, and we really want to put those people to work for something that we can all believe in and tackle climate change at the same time. The other thing I think is that it's completely ridiculous that our government continues to subsidize oil and gas to the tune of over $18 billion. Some of that money is even going towards new exploration, when scientists have told us that we can't burn the oil we've already found. So why are we even giving these companies that reap massive profits year over year the money to search for more? So the NDP would immediately scrap these subsidies and move that money into a major home retrofit program that will aim to retrofit 3.3 million homes with energy-saving upgrades, including free retrofits for 2.3 million low-income households and grants or low-interest loans for 1 million more, cutting energy bills by up to $4,500 a year for families all across Canada. And that's just another example of when we put our money where it's important, if we focus our efforts on tackling climate change while also holistically helping people across Canada, we can really make some good work here.
Mm-hmm. So, for Canada has a role to play, not just, of course, domestically, but also internationally. And so this is a very topical issue. But what is you and your party's stance on the current genocide happening in Gaza?
Mm-hmm. This issue is something that is near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of friends from Lebanon, from Palestine, from Jordan. I grew up hearing their struggle and really learning and understanding from them the crisis that really exists there. The second I could, I signed on to the Vote Palestine platform as soon as I had the opportunity. I am a strong supporter of Palestinian human rights. I have attended and spoken at a number of rallies locally, but also up in Ottawa over the last few years. And I believe that there's no reason why Canada should be continuing to send weapons to a state that is committing genocide. I'll highlight the main points of that Vote Palestine pledge, which are to impose a two-way arms embargo on Israel, and Canadian involvement in illegal Israeli settlements, address anti-Palestinian racism and protect freedom of expression on Palestine, recognize the state of Palestine, and protect and fund Gaza relief efforts, including UNRWA. As the NDP, we don't want to just stop there. We also strongly support the continued investigations that will help pull the arrest warrants against Netanyahu and his cabinet ministers. And I believe that until there is justice for Palestinians, there will be no lasting peace in the region. The previous government's inaction on this is really unforgivable, and how many more innocent people are we going to watch die before we do something?
Very briefly, maybe you can just tell people where they can find more about you and how to contact you if they have more questions.
Yeah, to close this out, I'll just say we don't want to end up like the States. We don't want a two-party system. Our government really shines when we're all represented in this government, and the evidence is clear. Even with only 24 NDP MPs in the House, we were able to leverage our position to get pharmacare, dental care, child care, worker protections, and so much more. Imagine what we can do if we keep fighting.
You've been listening to Héline Chow on Meet the Candidate, the NDP candidate for Waterloo. The views expressed were those of the candidate, not necessarily those of the Radio Waterloo Board of Directors, volunteers, sponsors, or advertisers. All Waterloo Region candidates were invited to meet the candidate, but some candidates have declined to appear on the radio, and some have not responded at all. Remember, the election is on the 28th of April. Show notes, podcast, and video will be available shortly on the Radio Waterloo website at radiowaterloo.ca/MTC. The show is produced by me, Bob Jonkman, in the studios of CKMS-FM. The theme music is Falling Sky by Jason Shaw of Audionautics.com and used under a Creative Commons Attribution Only license.